Entonces en 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hola a todos, muy buenos días. Les damos la bienvenida a este webinar organizado por Posgrados Uniminuto, en el que vamos a tener invitados internacionales contándonos acerca del liderazgo en la educación en posgrados y diferentes temas que ustedes podrán enriquecer acá a través de este webinar. Inicio para explicarles que en la parte de abajo, en la configuración, en la parte de la derecha, pueden configurar los subtítulos en español para las personas que no hablen inglés y puedan asimismo pues participar de este webinar. Los voy a dejar con Soraya, quien va a ser la moderadora de este webinar. Ella es nuestra directora del programa de gerencia social de posgrados aquí en Uniminuto. Soraya, buenos días y bienvenida.
Buenos días, muchas gracias Jason. Bienvenidos a todos y todas. Espero hayan logrado activar la opción de los subtítulos, porque como bien saben, pues es un webinar que estaremos realizando en inglés. So I would like to welcome everybody. We have people from Colombia, from the US, and hopefully from around the world joining us in this webinar about leadership under the COVID-19 and the day after. So as we know, in this global crisis, universities have had to face a variety of challenges, from determining certain expert roles in the fields of science, giving advice in public policy decisions, dealing with students and stakeholders, ensuring continuity of classes, making educational resources available in digital formats, mobilizing research groups, participating in government discussion, among other activities. So we have learned that perhaps in certain topics there is of urgency, but also we are in a period of experimentation, of finding opportunities, recognizing what works and what doesn't. And particularly in terms of graduate schools, we have had to face challenges given the characteristics, the experience, the professional background of our students, but also the way the university's ecosystems work, not just in Colombia, but globally around the world. And so this brings us to a variety of questions that have to do with leadership of graduate schools in this current situation, and also other questions regarding how to motivate students without face-to-face contact, for example, how to ensure appropriate teaching and learning models, how to ensure financial sustainability, how to conduct graduate level research, how to establish structures to be able to make consensual and effective decision making. So we have a variety of questions, and that's why we organized this webinar, to be able to discuss some of the ideas that arise from this current situation in the particular context of graduate schools, and how we can have a more leading way to deal with what everything that's happening. So today, I have the pleasure to share this webinar with two professors, Professor Maggie Pitts from the University of Arizona, and Professor Jenny Hart from the University of Missouri. So welcome to you both. I will so briefly read your bio. Professor Maggie Pitts has a PhD from Penn State University. She's the Associate Dean, Academic Affairs of the Graduate College, Professor of Communications at the University of Arizona. As Associate Dean, Dr. Pitts oversees graduate program development, graduate policies and procedures, graduate admissions, and graduate student academic progress throughout degree completion. In this role, Dr. Pitts is an advocate for graduate students and graduate education. She's especially interested in the promotion of graduate diversity, integrity, and interdisciplinary and cultivating opportunities for graduate students to thrive. Prior to serving as Associate Dean, Dr. Pitts was Director of Graduate Studies in the Department of Communication, where she continues to teach, mentor, and advise doctoral and master's students. With more than 50 scholarly publications, she has an active line of research in the areas of interpersonal and intercultural communication, where she approaches the study of human interaction from a positive social scientific lens. So welcome, Maggie, to this webinar.
Thank you.
And we also have Professor Jenny Hart. She's the Dean of the Graduate School and Vice Provost of Graduate Studies at the University of Missouri. She's also a professor. She's a full professor of higher education in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Analyst. Prior to her current position, she served as the Associate Vice Chancellor of Graduate Studies, the Assistant Vice Provost for Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, and the Department Chair for ELPA at Missouri, at the University of Missouri. Jenny has worked at the university since 2003. She completed her bachelor's degree in foreign service at Georgetown University. She has a master's in higher education and student affairs administration from the University of Vermont, and her PhD is in higher education administration from the University of Arizona. She worked for 9 years as student affairs educator at a number of colleges and universities, and 1 year as a faculty member at Southeast Missouri State University prior to joining the faculty at the University of Missouri. Her scholarship centers on 3 mutually reinforcing themes: faculty work, gender and feminism, and campus climate. She has published 44 peer-reviewed articles and edited a variety of book chapters, and of course has supervised 29 doctoral dissertations and has regularly taught courses regarding a variety of topics. So welcome to you both. It's a pleasure to have you with us in this webinar organized by Uniminuto. I would like, first of all, for you to give us a brief overview of your graduate school, universities, as to understand the particular context. As you know, we have wide variety of students and people joining us right now. So I would like to give right first, Maggie, if you would like to share us the context of your university.
Buenos días y gracias. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I hope that everybody can hear me okay. I just want to introduce a little bit about my university. It's the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona. And you can see we are surrounded by beautiful mountains here in the southernmost part of Arizona, just north of Mexico. So we have a really interesting cultural diversity here in Tucson, and it's one of the longest inhabited cities in North America. So we have many different indigenous groups that have lived in this space and created opportunities for us to learn from many peoples over time. The University of Arizona is the state's flagship university. It is also a land-grant university, which means that part of our mission is to make sure that we give back to the people and to the community here in Arizona, and as well to connect between ourselves and other global locations to share knowledge in that way. We are a member of the American Association of American Universities and ranked among the top 20 public research universities in the United States. We also have special designation to serve 2 unique populations within the United States, which are Hispanic, we're a Hispanic serving institution, as well as American Indian and Alaskan Native serving institution. So we promote diversity and indigenous knowledges right here in our university. The Graduate College plays a unique role in that, in bringing people from all over the United States and all over the globe to study with professionals in many different areas across campus. We have over 8,000 graduate students. 18% of our student body are international students from over 100 different countries. And we have 22% of our student body are unrepresented minority students. So lots of diversity right here. We offer nearly 3,000 teaching and research assistantships to our graduate students to help support them as they go through their academic journey in over 100 different doctoral programs, 150 different master's programs, and more than 60 graduate certificate programs. So that's a little bit about the University of Arizona and our mission here at the Graduate College, which is to support and offer leadership in order to serve and oversee the graduate enterprise here at the University of Arizona. So thank you for having me. I'll turn it over to Jenny. That should work. I think you're on mute.
You are 100% correct. Gracias y buenos días. I'm going to talk a little bit about the University of Missouri, and so that you understand the larger context in which we operate. You will see from some of the points that I'm going to single out that the University of Missouri and the University of Arizona have a number of similar characteristics. Like the University of Arizona, we are a land-grant university. That means that agriculture and extension are fundamental parts of our mission, and so we serve the state, the nation, and globally our communities. We too are a member of the Association of American Universities, and we are the first public university west of the Mississippi River. We were founded in 1839 and became a land-grant institution in the 1860s. Our university is made up of 13 schools and colleges, and we are one of very few institutions that also include a school of medicine, law, and veterinary medicine. Those three schools are actually professional schools, so they do not fall under the purview of the graduate school, but wanted to make mention of those schools within our overall university population. We have approximately 30,000 students on campus. Thanks, Maggie. The mission of the graduate school is to advocate for, support, and advance graduate and postdoctoral education. So our graduate school also is responsible for the training, development, and support of our postdoctoral scholars, as well as the graduate students on our campus. We have 59 doctoral programs, 88 master's programs, and 5 educational specialist programs. We offer 55 graduate certificate programs, and of all of the programs, 85 of them are delivered online or in a distance format. We have about 6,000 graduate students enrolled, and among those, a little over 1,000 of them are international students from 100 countries. We have 715 students from underrepresented and underserved backgrounds. Diversity is certainly a priority on our campus, and it's an area that we have to work particularly hard at because we're a predominantly white institution located in the middle of the United States and in Missouri, which is a predominantly white community. We have over 2,000 students who hold fellowships or assistantships, either in teaching, research, or library administration. And that gives you a little overview of the University of Missouri and the graduate school context in particular, and I'll hand it back to Soraya.
Thank you, Maggie and Jenny. I'm sure that now that we have a context, well, We can begin to talk about how is it that your graduate schools are coping with what is happening around the world. We have heard several voices affirming that graduate programs will be much more influenced by virtuality than undergraduate ones. So first of all, I would like to know, what is your opinion regarding this topic? Will face-to-face graduate courses disappear, for example? Or how should institutions rethink the offer of graduate courses and access to them within the framework of COVID-19 and the days after? So I open the mic for either of you. Maggie, Jenny, go ahead.
I can start if you'd like, Maggie. In many respects, I think graduate students, because most of our classes are relatively small, we're in a good position to actually offer more face-to-face options for our graduate students than our undergraduate students. Some of that also is the scope of our institution. So as a large research university, our 25,000 or so undergraduate students, many of them take classes in 300, 400, 500 person lectures. And those experiences will look very different in the fall. We will not be having 300, 400, 500 person lectures. But our graduate classes that tend to be smaller, we definitely have space to accommodate them and to allow for physical distancing. And we are also requiring all of our students this fall to wear face coverings, and our instructors will be wearing face shields so that their mouths can be seen for students who may be hard of hearing or rely on lip reading. So we've been kind of thinking through some of those things, but specifically for our graduate students, we have already opened up our laboratory spaces, our creative works spaces, our studios. And so graduate students and faculty have been the first folks to already come back to campus. This summer, we are offering no courses that are face-to-face at the graduate or undergraduate level, but because graduate students are so enmeshed in the research and creative works experience, those folks are already back and working hard to continue their research careers and prepare to advance to degree completion.
Thank you. The University of Arizona has made some very similar decisions. We've been trying to maximize flexibility in terms of course modality, and the president of the university has gone out on a limb, I think, and has made many public announcements that the University of Arizona will open, face-to-face, barring any sort of worsening situation. And we're really trying to mitigate the risk that we know is going to happen when we re-enter the campus in the fall. But like Jenny was saying, the University of Arizona also will require face coverings and is working strategically in ways to think about how to maneuver people around campus and use all of the space that we have available in order to provide more space for individuals in that time. I think that COVID-19 has really given universities the chance to restructure and advance graduate education. It's really hard because I think we have two areas that we're focusing on. One is managing the demands of this present moment, and the other one is embracing the opportunity for change in the future. So I think it's really imperative that the leaderships of individual universities, but also collective universities around the globe, really take this opportunity to respond to immediate graduate student needs, but also to shaping the future of graduate education. So when I think about the question that Soraya asked, like, well, are we going to keep face-to-face courses going, and is it more likely to go virtual for grad students? I think like Jenny, I actually think that graduate programs stand a better chance of continuing in a face-to-face mode. And I think that's really important because part of the mentorship, the apprenticeship, and that academic journey for a graduate student is to work side by side a faculty mentor, to work side by side people in the laboratory or creative settings in that very close relationship. But I also think that due to the changes in April, we went to remote teaching only. Nobody came back to campus. And what we learned in that is that it's very hard to make a shift to doing everything virtually or remotely. But after you get over the challenge, then we learned that both learners and teachers were very adaptive. And all of a sudden, we learned that we can do more things than we ever thought of from farther away. So what I think is that we need to capitalize on this moment to increase flexibility in graduate education in order to create the opportunities that are necessary for transformative learning in place with other diverse people around you. Because we learn informally that way as well. But also to use the digital technologies that we have to reach out to other experts in the field and other places in the field, that this teaches me that we can have this conversation in Colombia and talk about what's happening here and how that might transfer to what's happening there. So I think that this gives us that opportunity to have more hybrid teaching models, to create more of a global university setting so that we can share more of the important knowledges that are found around the world, but to do that in ways that are strategic so that it increases inclusivity and sharing and isn't a one-way transmission, but also doesn't exasperate the a digital divide, right? And who has access to this? So creating communities where a community can meet to have access to other communities and have those supported by the structure, I think is a really cool way of thinking about the future, of graduate education. I would say that the one thing we've really learned is that being adaptive and flexible in the classroom to be able to teach people live and in person while at the same time using Microsoft Teams or Zoom to bring in other people really makes a classroom more inclusive and creates more opportunities than barriers. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Jenny. Well, I think this opens up our conversation. As you both mentioned, graduate schools have particular challenges, but they're also at an advantage given the small groups, like you mentioned, and also the characteristics of our students. And you were both talking about embracing the opportunity for change. I guess this particular situation, this unique situation, opens up, as you said, a variety of opportunities, and also to rethink our models of teaching, being more flexible, engaging in different types of interaction, community building, digital community building, and all this hybrid model. And you also mentioned this idea of global university, which I think is very enriching and perhaps what we need to work on for sure. And so this brings me to my next question. Given that universities have to rethink their models and they are using this opportunity to make changes, in terms of students, what are the new knowledge and skills that graduate courses must offer to strengthen continuous professional development in this unique situation? We know that we have to make changes and we are doing them at the level of the university, but what about the graduate courses as such and the skills that students need to develop? So
okay, should I lead off on this one? Okay, so I try to think about this question and to think about it, really broadly. Here is what I think. I think we have, again, this opportunity out of crisis. So history would tell us that we may see an influx in university enrollment because of economic hardship and lack of employment opportunities right now. So some people may take this opportunity in order to continue in their degree, or to take maybe a professional certificate, or start a professional graduate degree program. So I started thinking about what some of the challenges are in graduate programs, which is how do we teach all the kinds of learners that are there? I think we're going to see an increase in people who want a degree for practical applied skills to use in a business setting, and to be able to use those to advance in their own career. This makes me think that what we need to do is train our graduate faculty a little bit more into how to think about teaching and training a workforce rather than an academic workforce, and in doing ways that offer both that deep philosophical learning that graduate education has to deepen a disciplinary knowledge, the theoretical knowledge, to teach continued skills of critical thinking and communication and cultural competence, so that any person who is participating in a graduate degree program can gain both practical skills that they can use in the workforce, but also have the mindset capability to think through and communicate about ethical issues, for example, or how to navigate when there are differing values that are at stake. So I think that the push needs to be able to give students skills that they can use and apply to enhance our communities or our workplaces, but to do so in ways that also transform thinking of individual students into something a little bit deeper, and to gain an appreciation, I think, for critical thinking and critical communication, to both challenge and engage. And I think we can also model within the university an appreciation for diverse language, diverse knowledge, ways of thinking about time, and ways of thinking about, I don't know, I guess our cultural values, right? How do American cultural values of time and productivity influence the workforce? And then what happens if we train a graduate body to think about other cultural values and the ways that they think about time differently? And so there may be a longer engagement. So to me, I think it's that balance between training faculty members to think about teaching applied skills to, especially to new learners, but also not to give up on what's great about graduate education and those deep philosophies that underpin it, which is really to sit and to think through things and be very deliberate in processing information and sharing information. And I'll stop talking there, and I'll turn it over to Jenny to respond to that.
Well, we're on very much the same wavelength with regard to this. Prior to COVID, one of the foci of many of our associations, scholarly associations related to graduate education, has been thinking more about job diversity, thinking about how we're training graduate students for a variety of workplaces and work contexts. And I think post-COVID, it's become increasingly more important that we're spending a lot of time helping our faculty to prepare students. I think our students are already asking for it, But as academics, we're not trained to prepare folks for positions outside of the academy. And so it is really a necessary professional development opportunity for our graduate faculty to think more about how they can support students for a variety of careers. And in many respects, what we do in graduate education allows for that. But I don't think we talk enough about how those skills are transferable to a variety of settings. Perhaps one of the center points of graduate education is problem solving. And that's what we do in research. We solve problems. Sometimes they're applied, sometimes they're much more theoretical, but in any event, we are solving problems and solving world problems. This skill is transferable to any work setting, to any life skill. So I think that still remains kind of at the heart of what graduate education is and should be. I think on a more practical level, I think what COVID is also giving us the opportunity to do is to help our students learn how to be better instructors for those who are going into the academy. They'll learn how to teach online. They'll be able to be much more flexible as instructors in ways that we really haven't trained graduate students to do in the past. And we're in a moment where we're forced to do that. And I think that's really important, because what online modalities allow us to do, and Maggie touched on this, is to increase our diversity, increase who's in the conversation and how we think about ideas in new ways. So I think that's also really important. I think the other thing that we are seeing now is an increase in how we deliver degrees, or different ways of delivering degrees. So for example, more certificate programs, ideas around micro-credentialing, and there are there's pushback against both of these ideas within the context of graduate education. However, they are increasingly more important because of the very points Maggie raised about who's going to be coming back to get retrained and retool. And those are the kinds of things that they're going to want to look for, kind of a packaged opportunity to gain a specific knowledge and skills. And so as programs, we have to think more about being more flexible to allow for these kinds of credentialing opportunities in order for us to continue to expand and grow and frankly serve our student population.
Thank you both. Well, certainly, I think we're all on the same wavelength, even us here in Colombia. We're thinking about more practical, as you said, also more flexible. And all this idea of supporting our students for a variety of contexts, ensuring, of course, all this idea of diversity in a broader perspective, as you well mentioned it. And well, we have to work on developing all these skills and knowledge and problem solving, which in a way is not something new. It's just this unique situation brings us to rethink in an urgent manner what to do, how can we support it, and how can we solve all the problems that are arising with the current situation. And so, well, given all these changes, what do you think will not change? Would you recommend graduate students, all those who are thinking maybe into going into a graduate program, and where can universities and educators lean on to seek support and to improve their teaching model, and also as well the learning model from the graduate students? So an open question, just to see your perspective. So Jenny,
Sure.
or Maggie, go ahead.
I'll go ahead. Well, even though we are at this precipice that is focused on change and transformation, higher education is traditionally very slow to change. And so I do think that there is going to be some aspects of what we do and how we do it that won't change and perhaps shouldn't change. I think the idea that graduate education is built on this model of apprenticeship and mentoring is incredibly important. It's incredibly important to develop those relationships. And so one thing I hope never changes is the centrality of relationship building as part of graduate education. And we would be, I think, struggling tremendously in terms of solving global problems if we don't continue to build upon relationship building. It makes for better science. It makes for better art. It makes for better humanists. It's just really fundamental to who we are. So I don't think that will change. I think we will continue, especially at institutions like where Maggie and I are, to focus on research and the power of research, and that being part and parcel to the graduate educational experience. So I think research might look different. We might be asking new and different questions, and we should be. But I do think that will still kind of be the undergirding of what's at the heart of graduate education. It's all yours, Maggie.
Yes, I agree. I think that's beautifully put, Jenny. I think what we have to do is continue to harness the passion of students' curiosity and sense of wonder, and that's actually what we have to lean into, because graduate faculty need the graduate students, otherwise we wouldn't be graduate faculty, but that's not really the most important part of the equation. Graduate students come because they're seeking that relationship, they're seeking opportunities to ask questions, to succeed and to fail in a place that offers them support, so that they can continue to be influenced by many others and many disciplines, in art and in science, in all of the things that we do. And the university is a unique setting where all of these come together. And even if it's just in the coffee shop on campus where you're accidentally bumping into another kind of scientist or artist, that is where a lot of the magic happens. So I think what we need to continue to lean into is the passion that graduate students bring to pursue to push the boundaries, to push us, because that's where the forward motion is. And I think graduate faculty and graduate mentors also want to invite and light up graduate students in this way, in part because we're aware that we need outside thinkers to help our science and our art flourish. And at the same time, that can help us push scholarship forward, push humanity forward. But it also provides a sense of legacy. I had a hard time this year. Maybe this is a turning point that a lot of academics make. All of a sudden, my graduate students are doing things I didn't want them to do with my ideas, right? Like, my idea only went this far, and now they're jumping off of that and taking my idea in new ways. And I think, whoa, wait, I invented that. What are you doing with that? And then I had to step back and say, oh, that's really cool. Now it's not my idea. Now it's an idea that's out there, and my graduate students and their colleagues and other people have more access to this maybe one kernel of an idea that might impact something positive, which would be great. So I think there's also this maybe hope for that legacy, that not just will my own discipline flourish or benefit or me, but that through our graduate students and then their graduate students, we influence the trajectory of art and science. There's not a better power than curiosity and a sense of wonder and passion, you know, to harness. And we need to do it sooner. We need to inspire this in early, you know, education, in high school. Those students need to have access to learning and thinking models at the university, you know, setting. And then we need to think about how we attract undergraduates into this next level for those who have that kind of passion for thinking long-term in this way. And then supporting them, you know, beyond the academy. So there's the power that's already there. We have to get out of the way of their interest, and their interest sometimes looks very different than where our interests lie, and that can cause tension and conflict within a program, and I see that too, and then they feel like everything's going to fall apart. But then give it another year or 2 years, and that transformation has moved the science and the thinking that's going on in that particular discipline or in that unit on campus. It's advanced them because they're actually dealing with the struggle. So the struggle is good eventually, I think. So that's where the power is.
Thank you both. Yeah, so we have a really important role, as you both mentioned, in encouraging our students, inspiring them, making sure they innovate, they think outside the box, and of course that's like really important in graduate education. And with our current students, it's perhaps easier to do this. But how could we encourage those who are thinking about whether or not to pursue a graduate degree? What is your perception? What could we do to encourage those, and so that they actually see the importance of carrying on with their studies, and given all the changes that we have mentioned, it's easier to perhaps talk to our current students and encourage them, but what can we do for those that are currently thinking whether or not to join a graduate program?
Yeah, I think how first they have to be aware of what that possibility is, right? And so it's one of the things that I encourage our graduate student council to do is to stop, and the university really, to stop thinking about graduates and undergraduates as different bodies of students, but to really think about it almost in the way we think about first-year students and senior students, that our graduate students can also mentor and bring along undergraduates and show and model the work that they're doing and the excitement that they're doing. So bridge programs between undergraduate and graduate, I think, are a great place to do that. And providing opportunities for undergraduate students to work with us in the lab, to work with us in the classroom, and saying, you know, you think in ways that we might be able to deepen and enhance through additional you know, opportunities in graduate school. Have you thought about that? So that invitation, I don't know how I ended up in graduate school. I don't know anybody in my life except for me that's in graduate school. Somebody mentioned it to me once. That was it. And I thought, yes, that is what I want to do. Thank goodness there was a person that said that to me. So that I think that interpersonal connection is important. I think the true barriers are economic, you know, that we need to find ways to support students to be able to not have to worry about making ends meet and being stressed and disappointed and fearful as graduate students. just because of the academic context, not to mention the other social pressures and everything else that happens. So how can we reduce the economic impact for students? And I don't know what the answer is there within the United States. It's a very difficult thing to approach, but yeah, I think I'll turn it over to Jenny. I'll keep thinking about it, but the key, I think, is really attracting people earlier.
Yeah, Maggie, I think you raise a very good point there about recruiting early and often, because it really is this, somebody recognizes potential in you and says, have you thought about this? I certainly, I don't come from a family of academics, so it never crossed my mind that I would go to graduate school. It was pretty clear I was going to go to college, but not graduate school. And, so it is really important that we are recognizing the potential in our undergraduate students, in our high school students, bringing those folks into our labs and studio spaces to be part of the experience, to understand the excitement of being intellectually curious. And as I say the word potential, though, I also say that with some hesitation, because I think potential often gets defined in a very narrow way, particularly in academia. And so we need to think about potential much more holistically. We need to think about who it is we need in our communities to advance our science and art and ideas, and not rely on whether or not somebody is going to be able to score well on a standardized test. But that's often how we base whether or not somebody actually is able to get into the door for graduate education or undergraduate education in the United States, for sure. I think we need to inspire students. We need to inspire them to recognize that there are opportunities out there, and that graduate education isn't only about preparing for the academy. And in fact, half of our graduate students, half of our doctoral students go into positions outside of academia. But that's not a story we tell very much. We tell the story of, I'm going to become a professor, that's why I go to graduate school. And that's part of it and should continue to be part of it, but we need to expand that narrative to make graduate school a place that is serving the community much more broadly.
Yeah, can I just add, I just want to add, Soraya. I mean, I think this is beautiful, right? And this is not probably what I'm supposed to say, but sometimes I get myself in trouble. We need to value the skills and the passion and the knowledge that all of our youth have. Graduate education is one valuable pathway of what I firmly believe that we need to also value and respect and embrace the many other pathways that our youth take to create a better and strong community. You know, I think the graduate education is one of the great opportunities, but it's only just one of them. So I do think we also, when we're telling that narrative, I agree with Jenny that we need to also tell the narrative that I have a doctoral degree or I have a master's degree, and now I want to apply that learning to my community, to better my community. That's hugely important. And it's also important to say that there are vocational and professional training that we need, and we need to value that knowledge and that the application of that knowledge. So I think there's a better narrative to tell, which is one of educating all of our youth and valuing their contributions to our communities. And I hope that we can move closer to that. Still, I love graduate education, but there are other great things too.
Thank you both. I guess this is a really important discussion that we have right now as well, both in our university and in the country as such, because it's difficult times. Difficult times are coming ahead in terms of the economy. So we all have to rethink what are the investments that are worth making at a certain point in life, and then certain degrees or certain certifications might become like more valuable at a given moment, and also the flexibility that we were talking about. Perhaps having a certification, and from then on you go into graduate education, and also the different pathways that you can follow afterwards. Particularly in the program where I have the pleasure of being the director, we work a lot with the public sector. So all the students in the social management program actually are developing certain skills to be able to transmit them to the community. It's probably a really small percentage, the ones that are thinking to follow a career in the academic field. It's more about the social transformation. And actually, this is a narrative that is throughout the university. If you're going to study something, do it because you want to work for the well-being of others and you want to follow social transformation, as a bigger kind of opportunity that you can develop. And as you said, it's about working together. I guess that's also really important, working together, both as a community and also within the different areas of the university, so that we can strengthen like what we do, and also strengthen the education that we are giving to our graduate students. But I sometimes wonder if, we provide them with certain skills, but then often it's them, the graduate students, teaching us as well. So it's of course a two-way thing, which actually makes it very encouraging and very enriching for us who we have the pleasure to teach and be involved in. And this takes me to the next question. Well, we have a few questions from our audience as well, and one of them is, given that graduate students face particular challenges, as we know, in terms of work, personal life, education balance, in terms of the investments they can do or not, how should graduate education be designed for students to thrive and not just to survive? As we all know, graduate school is hard. It involves not sleeping. It involves having to give up on certain things at some point. So how do we make sure that our students really thrive and enjoy the decision that they've made, so that they can follow their career and hopefully it has a positive impact in their life? So Maggie, Jenny?
I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Jenny. I think this is a wonderful question, and I think part of it is being able to identify what is going right in a graduate program or at your university, to be able, and I think a lot of graduate students are very good at that. There's the development sometimes of these very strong cohorts and social support systems that are there, and those last for many of us throughout the lifespan. So there's an inherent connection that happens within many graduate programs, certainly not all of them, and the ones that are face-to-face have more of a likelihood of that. But I think that, so there's a natural pull for graduate students to learn how to maybe survive together and to pull together to combine their resources and provide that support. But when we move from survival to thriving, that's got to be because the university itself is creating a new structure for the promotion of physical, familial, maybe spiritual and mental health, and thinking about students as a whole person, that our students are family members, they may be parents, they have outside jobs perhaps that they're doing, they may have invisible or visible illnesses and are different ages and abilities, and they come from a variety of different backgrounds. So we have, I think, been thinking about graduate students in graduate education in a very narrow way, and sometimes in a harmful way, that we think of them as people who can advance our own scientific thought or inquiry, or teach for us. Sometimes I think we think about them in ways that are very inhumane as workers. And that I will offer my knowledge, but it's up to you to take it. And so it puts the onus on the student, rather than recognizing that there's an opportunity, I think, to flourish there by focusing on the individual student and their wholeness. And what that might mean, again, I probably shouldn't say things like this, but what that might mean is reducing the size of some graduate programs, so that there is more focus on individual doctoral students and master's students to be able to put our energies on one, and to have that student really flourish, rather than zap our resources for too many. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Jenny, but I think it's a wonderful question.
Yeah, I do too, and I think the tendency may be to focus on the individual student from the standpoint of they need to figure out how to thrive. And that's definitely not what Maggie was saying. I think it's important to reinforce that there are structural issues and barriers that are part of our educational systems, period. Graduate education as well, obviously. And those are the things that we need to change so that students can thrive, so that students know that it is absolutely okay that they struggle, that it's part of the process in many respects, and that we have support systems to help them through those struggles. It may mean we need more mental health support on our campuses. It may mean that we need to rethink how we do admissions, how many students we admit, are we just thinking about the entry point and the exit point? Why aren't we thinking about the parts in between that give students what they need in order to be as successful as possible? And successful, I mean in the broadest sense. Why do we have limits on the number of years that a student can take to complete the dissertation? Now, I understand why that's there, because knowledge does have time limits in some respects. People may have to, refresh. At the same time, are we creating these artificial barriers that are not allowing students to tend to all of the aspects of who they are as a whole person, getting back to Maggie's point? And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Yes, certainly this makes us probably rethink, as you said, on an individual level. Of course, we have to think as a whole, as graduate school, but also the particular needs of each one of our students. And this brings me to a question from actually one of our teachers, and he's wondering what skills and values should we strengthen, both from the perspective of the student, but also the perspective of the teacher? What the skills do you think the teachers need to develop in order to give this or transmit this idea to the students that we really care about their individual situation, and it's not just transmit the idea, it's to actually do it. So because we know that teachers are the ones who are more in contact with students. Often we as directors or in certain administrative roles, we see the students only when they might have an issue or problem, but teachers, professors actually have contact on a daily basis sometimes. So what skills do they need to develop as such to be able to strengthen all this education provision that we are giving to our graduate students?
I can take that to start. Yeah. So some of this is faculty are unfortunately coming late to the party, right? Like, because we don't teach in graduate school how to be a good mentor, how to be a good teacher, how to enhance learning, not only for undergraduate students, but for graduate students. Like, those aren't skills and knowledge that most graduate programs provide. So we have faculty who come in, no fault of their own, having a model of mentorship that is based on an N of 1, you know, who their mentor was, whether that person was bad or good. And so I think mentoring is part of what's at the heart of this, developing good skills to be a good mentor. I don't think you have to have all of the answers, but you have to know what the resources are on campus to be able to point somebody to the sources of support that they need. And, you know, and it's hard to retrain faculty who have been socialized in an academy for so long that doesn't reinforce this. So in some ways, I think this is kind of a twofold approach. One, we do need to support faculty to gain better skills in terms of mentoring. But two, we need to change what we're doing in graduate education to prepare future educators to be mentors, so that they're learning the art and science of mentoring and the art and science of teaching, and as well as the art and science of research, frankly, which we tend to do pretty well. But the other kind of aspects, how to be a better community member, that's another thing I think we need to teach. And so I think it's professional development for faculty, but it's also how we deliver graduate education needs to change so that we don't reinforce this cycle.
Yeah, I would just add to that. And I don't know how to do it, but I think, you know, what Jenny says is exactly right, that if we only have this one model and we continue to replicate that, and it's not, it also is very, I think in some ways it's a very gendered model, or it's just sort of that one narrative again about what we call like grit and resilience, which I think are great traits, but it's not the conditions under which people will flourish. They may fight to get to where they need to be or to go beyond that bar, but they're fighting rather than rising above it. If I could teach faculty one thing, and this comes, I think this comes from probably just my perspective, and it may be a very sort of a feminist standpoint theory perspective, an underdog perspective. Can we teach faculty and students more about perspective taking, empathy, compassion? These are not things that are valued they're not valued in my social scientific field as a mode of inquiry. I don't believe they are valued in the academy. Maybe there's some probably programs in which that is the core value, or administration. I don't think when people say that Maggie's very compassionate, that they mean to say that in a way that's a compliment to me all the time. And yet I think that empathy and compassion, that if we could understand that our students come to us from very different lived worlds than our own, I would say in all cases, that if we could understand a little bit of how to even try to step into their shoes and see things like privilege, and see things like accessibility, from a different perspective, then it may allow us to support the whole student better, or to be more understanding, or to offer more flexibility in things that seem really like rigid structures. But I think what Jenny was saying too, some of them are maybe not arbitrary, but is a 5-year time to degree really so set in stone, or can a student pursue a degree half time and take longer but still remain current? And understanding the necessity for a student to be able to do that, and the brilliance that they're in, that it would benefit us if we could all think a little bit more empathically. If we had that magic wand.
Thank you both. Yeah, certainly. It's about, I guess we come back to the thinking about the student as an individual, and not always boxing, putting everyone in the box. Perhaps if they have to take time off, often we think it has to do perhaps with their interest level, motivation, but there might be other things going through their life, their experience, probably taking a break to get some work experience. And all this kind of makes perfect sense. And you also mentioned something which I think is incredibly enriching about being a good mentor. How it's not just the system, it's not just the students, it's us as professors or in administrative roles that we also have to develop all the skills, be more empathic, and of course, within the system, follow procedures, compassion. So I think all this is inviting us to really embrace the opportunity for change, which is some of the words that you used at the beginning, like throughout the different levels of the university, and of course the different individuals that are part of this ecosystem. And well, this brings me to another question. As well as we all know right now, in terms of social and political unrest, the situation worldwide due to inequality, various forms of discrimination is making us rethink, of course, throughout the different levels. So we were wondering, what is the role of universities, and especially graduate programs, in terms of everything that's happening around the world, not just COVID-19. There's also all this wave of different forms of discrimination. Maybe it's becoming more visible. Of course, throughout history, this has been present, but now it's becoming more visible. So how do you think we could contribute towards creating a more inclusive education that perhaps leads to eradicate all these forms of discrimination, and hence contribute to like social and political like sort of peace in some way? Of course, it's impossible. There's always going to be turmoil. But what can we do from our graduate programs and universities to contribute to this? So, Jenny?
Sure, I'll start. So I think we have a social and moral responsibility to be addressing inequities, oppression, systemic issues that perpetuate sexism and racism and classism and ableism and heterosexism, and the list goes on. And I think that can come in many ways. I think some of the things that immediately come to my mind are rethinking, as an academic in a particular field, what it is I'm having students read. What am I assigning them? Am I looking at a broader canon? Am I representing voices of color, international voices in the journal articles I'm asking folks to read? So I think that's, kind of on the very individual, what one faculty member can do. I think that's one of those things. I think it's also appreciating, and more than appreciating, really truly valuing the diversity of scholarship. That scholarship does not need to look one way necessarily. We need to be open to scholarship more broadly. We don't want future faculty members to learn in their graduate programs that if you write about race, you're not going to get tenure. And those messages are out there. So, those are kind of the individual sorts of things. And ultimately, it's a structural issue, again, that needs to change. So there are individual things that we can do as individual faculty members or as a graduate program. But I also need to rethink how we do admissions. Are we, who are we leaving out of the conversation when we are asking for a certain TOEFL score or a certain GRE score or a certain amount of research, undergraduate research, when we have students coming from schools and universities that don't have the capacity to have that program in place, but those students may be very successful. So, it also has to, so I think in order for us to really embrace this, we need to look at, as a university, what are we doing that is creating barriers for certain groups of people to thrive, going back to our earlier question. So I think it needs to happen on all of those levels, but for it to be sustained and successful, we have to get down to the structural issues.
Yeah, I think, yes, absolutely. The structure is a problem. I think in addition to what we can do to make our own classrooms transformative, are really talking to our university leadership about hiring and valuing diverse voices in the academy so that we have scholars of excellence that represent a diverse body, diversity in terms of ethnicity, in terms of race, in terms of sex, as much as possible, to truly seek that out, because it's hard to imagine yourself in a space where you don't see or hear the voices of other people who are like you. I also think that it is important. I'm from Tucson, so I have a passion for this area and the people of this area. But I lived in France twice. I've lived in California. I've lived on the East Coast. I've moved quite a few places, and I think that's benefited me in being able to develop an appreciation for difference. But I've also lived in places where you can talk about race, and you can talk about inequality, and you can dig in deep to a conversation without being afraid of making a mistake that would be hurtful to you or to another person, without being fearful of retaliation, because the conversations that center on race and inequality are so important in those communities that people like to talk about it. And I've lived in places where people won't use the word race and they won't talk about difference. And I've run into that in my new position here at the University of Arizona. I think we need to be able to teach people to embrace these conversations, that universities need to be a space for transformation and transformative dialogue. And there are experts on campuses whose expertise is in navigating conflict, for example, or in creating opportunities for intergroup harmony, right? Let's have a shared vision and a shared goal and work together and have structural support to make it happen. And the more that we can have positive, interactions among diverse groups of people, and we show how that happens in a real way, not finding diverse pictures and putting it on your website, the better we will all be. So the support has to be there, but but we can't back away from the conversation and be afraid of putting ourselves out on a limb in talking about race, talking about inequality, talking about sexual harassment, talking about any of these issues. You know, ableism, I think, is one that we especially don't talk about. We kind of dust it, you know, under the rug. But if we talked about these things, we would be able to make salient these differences that actually are important. The differences are there. The privileges are there. One of the things I try to teach my students is that we're all privileged in some way, and every single one of us is disadvantaged in some way as well. Some of us just aren't used to looking for it. We haven't been in the context where our privilege or our disadvantage matters a whole lot, but it's there, and we can, you know, critically think about that. It's scary for me. In the classroom, I feel very protected in these conversations because that's my role as an instructor. It's much scarier for me as an administrator. I did not realize until I stepped up into this position how fragile everything is, and that that people shy away from engaging in genuine dialogue about inequality and about racism and structural barriers. And that makes me feel like I'm slipping down ice a lot. And so I miss my classroom where it's a safe place, you know, for me to say, let's do this thing, and I'm going to give you the tools to do it. But I know there's some people out there that know how to help shape those conversations and give those tools. So I ask them to stand up and speak out, and that we have a voice. Everybody has a voice. And when we listen to others' voices and how our voice is in harmony with them, or maybe like, you know, jazz, and it maybe is disharmonious, is that a word? In some ways, that chaos, but it still makes something happen, and it pushes, you know, music forward, it pushes humanity forward. Why have a university if we can't have that? Then it just becomes, you know, online schooling that's not very fun.
Thank you both. Well, to sum it up, we could carry on talking about this, but unfortunately, we're already reaching the end of our webinar on the time that we have. I guess there was like a few reflections that we could do. First of all, you mentioned the importance of adapting to new routines, being flexible, having a more adaptive sense in everything that we do, both teachers, well, professors, students, and of course the whole system involved. And this means embracing the opportunity. So I guess we are, well, you could say we are lucky enough to be living through at this pandemic and everything that's happening. So try to make the best out of it and embrace the opportunities that this brings us. Also, I guess we also mentioned the importance of cooperation with the different actors, and I would say not just but also locally, nationally, and internationally, kind of like what we're doing right now, having this conversation in a broader perspective, because we do realize that our issues are quite similar, of course, within like the diversity of our countries and the context, but we have to talk about these things. Also, you mentioned the importance of soft and hard skills, developing our programs in the sense that we give more practical skills to our graduate students, but also the importance of what we call all the soft skills, communication, leadership, I guess compassion, empathy, become really important, and positive interactions throughout everything that we do. The idea of this open state of mind, I guess this has to be like throughout every action that we take, and probably also being more aware of our state of mind at all times. And finally, this idea about the global conversation, global university, and seeing university as a place for transformation, not just within, of course, the students, but the whole ecosystem and the system around us. So yeah, I guess our time is up. We could, of course, carry on talking about this. I would like to thank you. Thank you both in the name of Uniminuto. I think it has been great. It has been great to talk to you. Also, the interaction from our audience has been quite good. We could do another event perhaps in the future. I would love it. So I would like to thank you, and I also would like to invite our audience to look into the programs that our universities have, because the fact that we are rethinking all these issues, I think, makes us not just special, but it's like really important. In Uniminuto, we have a few graduate programs, specialization, master's programs. So I would encourage our audience to look into this. And also, I would like to thank both Jenny and Maggie for taking the time, for being so open with your ideas, your perspectives. So I don't know if you have some closing idea remarks that you would like to tell us, give our audience, and then we can end this webinar.
I would just like to say thank you very much. I wish that we could do this in person and then have a cup of coffee afterwards and continue the discussion, because I would really like to hear more about what's happening at Uniminuto and in your context as well there, and you know, how that informs how we can mutually inform and enhance each other. So, you know, this is a delight. Thank you so much, and I feel very honored to have been included in this panel. I would encourage anybody to send me an email. Feel free to reach out to me if you would like, and I'd be happy to have you.
Boy, I don't know if I can follow that up and say anything more than what Maggie has shared. It really, truly has been an honor and a privilege to be here, to be able to talk about issues that are very central to my day-to-day life, and know that we have partners globally who are interested in many of these same issues who we can learn from. This is really a collaborative opportunity for us to engage. One of the shortcomings, I think, in US higher education is that we are very focused on US higher education, and we don't do a good job at bringing in the expertise and the excellence that our international partners have across the world. And so the opportunity to be able to even engage like this has been really tremendous for me, and I want to thank you very much.
Well, thank you both. It has been a pleasure for us, and I'm sure for our audience as well. So I wish you a nice day, and hopefully we can follow up on that coffee in the future or another webinar. So take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y bueno, muchas gracias también a nuestro público por haber estado pendientes de este webinar. Los invitamos, como les decía, a revisar el portafolio de posgrados que tenemos. Y bueno, estaremos atentos a cualquier inquietud que presente. Muchas gracias.